So this was your guys' approach all the way through here, up to that lake, then up the glacier over there behind that little ridge?
Well, we were actually on the entire right-hand side of that glacier. The first night we camped on the right-hand side, or left-hand side of that lake, and then following the glacier, you can see the earth that's been churned up on top of it over there. We follow the glacier up on its right-hand side. We had to follow it up a couple of miles before we could find a way to get on it. You can see the rows of different colored dirt. That's actually part of the glacier. We were on the other side of that until we found a way to a ramp onto the glacier. Then the rest of the route's hidden right now.
The 1977 and 1978 routes were, I think, impossible. The glacier had just broken up so big. The ice fall that the 1978 guys had to traverse across, which was all covered in snow back then, was just huge chunks of broken ice, and it was about 1,000 feet tall, and it would have been super dangerous to have to go through it.
This is the first time we've had a real good close-up look of Mount Denison. The route we did previously 30 years ago, there was a whole lot more snow on the mountain. We went up pretty much the face you're looking at right now. But a whole lot of the snow's melted off of it. Instead of there being snow fields, now there are ice or snow cliffs. So we'll have to figure out a way to get up it by weaving our way through those.
As I learned more about the previous climbs and witnessed the current one, I began to see a common thread running between each expedition. And oddly enough, that same thread runs right through a college university as well. I saw failures that led to heightened knowledge for the future, and mistakes that enlightened generations to come. The first expedition of 1977 spent 14 days on the mountain and never even saw the summit. The second expedition spent 9 rainy days on the mountain and successfully reached the summit. This year's expedition is making progress twice as fast as that, and with incredibly fortunate weather. I can't help but be reminded of the spirit of academic progression and how we all learn from our past mistakes and experiences in order to develop a more refined knowledge based on the generations that came before us. In my eyes, the mountain was becoming something like a difficult math problem that took generations to solve. And now, after 30 years, it was finally ready to submit fully to the persistent climbers.
Without question, we were successful because of the lessons learned on the first expedition. And without question, the most recent expedition had learned both from the first expedition and from our expedition that became lessons for how to launch the second expedition. The fact is, we went back at a different time of the year when the weather was statistically significantly improved than they experienced in the first expedition. That was material. Without that, we probably wouldn't have summited the second time. We also went in from Kodiak Island the second time, whereas they had huge delays trying to get across the mountains from King Salmon in the first expedition. So they made judgments that were entirely appropriate for a first attempt to climb the mountain, but in retrospect, or from the lessons learned, we were able to do better, if you will, the second time through.
It seemed undeniable to me. Just as a scientist may struggle to break new intellectual ground only to pave the path for a future scientist to take the crown achievement, the adaptation of the climbers from year to year worked in a similar way. But as I read one of the 1978 accounts, I learned that it wasn't quite that simple. As the second expedition trudged through fog and rain, they came to a high point that they would call the summit. Triumphant, they turned to head back down. As they marched, the fog cleared and revealed a massive peak 2 miles beyond what they had just climbed. As the sun crept over them, so too did a slow realization. They had just climbed the wrong mountain.
Bill Dennis's first expedition had terrible luck. They got there and they sat in their tents with a torrential downpour that never ended, and they just basically ran out of food, and it was obvious that nothing was going to change, and so they had to give up. The second time, it was more of the same until they had this miraculous clearing of the weather, and they rushed out and climbed a mountain. It turned out to be the wrong one.
Here is a case where we had failed. I mean, a year and a half's worth of planning and effort, and we ended up on the wrong mountain. We had failed, and basically we failed. And it was an easily correctable mistake, and so we went back the next day and we corrected it. But having gotten there and come so close and not achieved what we had set out to do, we nevertheless persevered, and we were able to the next day correct our mistake and get on the summit. Again, the metaphor here is persistence and staying with it, and you know, the road to the top is not always straight. In our case, it went on the wrong mountain, but the fact is we ultimately did achieve the summit.
Getting to the top really was exciting. In fact, I've got a great photograph at home of, I think it was our bush pilot, this time flown in from Kodiak, not from King Salmon, flying over the mountain as we were on the summit. And so it was kind of neat to be, you know, waving at the airplane when it kind of dipped its wings, and you felt like you'd accomplished something. You know, one of the things a liberal arts education enables you to do, because you do it, is you do a lot of exploring the unknown, learning things, whether it's history, mathematics, languages, for the first time. Mountaineering, especially when you're on expeditions where you haven't been before, no one's been before, there's a lot of learning things for the first time.
First happening. Then what? You put the rope around it and fill it in? Nope. So then, then what you want to do is you want to take your axe or your hand, and you want to make a perpendicular line coming out through the snow.
Taylor's great. I mean, he hasn't done much of anything about this kind of thing, but he's up for anything. So Taylor will do whatever we need, and I'm sure just shine.
We woke up early and we started hiking. The snow wasn't as firm as we wanted it to be. Several guys had slept outside the night before, and it was just brilliant warm weather. All right, we're on top of a brand new peak named Jane Nisi Peak, and what we're looking at here is the best shots we've had of Mount Denison and Mount Stellar so far. I mean, these kind of have this cloud cover over them, but Mount Denison is the one furthest back. You can kind of see it gently rising and then covered with some clouds. Tomorrow we're going to be traversing around the backside of these slopes, and then we'll come out flush with the glacier pretty high up, which is kind of nice. There's a huge ice fall over there, which we'll get to avoid. Then we'll just travel up the glacier and we'll set camp at a high camp, probably the high camp for the whole trip.
At this point we're traversing a pretty steep side of a mountain or side of a ridge, whatever. We're going for a while and the wind's picking up. I'm getting nervous because I'm looking down the slope and this thing's like straight down, like if I fall, I'm gonna slide, you know, 2,000 feet. To go back that way about 200 yards, you'll see the glacier we crossed today. It's pretty